But with that, Stephen, with last discussion, we kind of talked about DBT specifically. And I thought today we could focus first on like one of the fundamentals, which is mindfulness. Can you explain first, like, what is mindfulness and why is it so important when it comes to DBT?
Yeah, so obviously mindfulness is something that a lot of people have heard the term mindfulness. There's a lot of perceptions about what mindfulness is, and there are a lot of different ways that mindfulness can be practiced by people in the world today. So first of all, it's really important just to say that there is no right or wrong way to practice mindfulness. So if there are people that are already practicing mindfulness and they've got a process that really works for them, it's really important just to keep doing that. We're not saying that the DBT way to practice mindfulness is right or wrong or anything like that. It's mindfulness has a number of different ways that it can be done. So if there's a way that you're doing it and it's working for you, keep doing it. At the same time, dialectically speaking, DBT has a very specific way of practicing mindfulness, and it's incredibly important to understand why mindfulness is a massive part of the DBT approach. When we look at what mindfulness is all about from a DBT perspective, it is all about building our mindful awareness for what's happening in our system. Um, One of the things that I used to say to people a lot in my one-on-one work, and when I first started doing this work, for example, practicing building our self-awareness is incredibly important. And I used to think, oh, I'm really self-aware when I first started doing this work. I know exactly what's going on. That was an absolute crock. I didn't have a clue what was going on inside of my personality when I actually started doing this type of work. So building self-awareness from a DBT perspective means starting to understand what it is that we're thinking, what it is that we're feeling, what physical sensations we're experiencing. So really developing our introspection. So learning how to look internally at what's happening in our system and identify our thoughts, identify our feelings, identify physical sensations, urges that we may be experiencing, so that we can start to build our own accountability for why we do what we do. A lot of people think that they are reacting to the external world. So, this happens out there. So that's why I do this. In actuality, what's happening is things are happening out there, but it's what's happening in our own internal world, the way that we're perceiving what's happening out there, the stories that we're telling ourselves about what's happening out there that dictates the way that we respond to it. So mindfulness, when it comes to DBT, is it underpins everything. Now, in the conversations that we're going to have over the next little bit, we're going to be talking specifically about the different skills of mindfulness, different skills of DBT, sorry. And mindfulness is really important to understand as the fact that it underpins everything. In the work that I do and in the groups that I do, obviously because you attend them, I integrate DBT with schema therapy. So some of the language in the conversation that we're going to have over the next little bit will be intertwined with some of the language from schema therapy. So talking about parts and things like that, and stories and schemas. Schema therapy, much like DBT, is underpinned with mindfulness. It's the two philosophies go very well together because of that mindfulness approach. So trying to create a mindfulness practice is really important when it comes to doing this type of work, so that we can start to build that self-awareness for what's happening in here. What is it that's kicking in for me? What am I thinking about this situation? What story am I telling myself about this situation? What's the emotion that's kicking in for me as a result of that story in this situation? What is the urge that is kicking in for me to react to this emotional experience regarding the story that I'm telling myself in this situation? And then when we link that with schema therapy, what we're trying to do is, from that awareness, we make the connection to the different parts of our personality and the different schema that those parts are reacting to. So honestly, mindfulness for me, when we start doing this work, it's one of the pillars of foundation that we need to start building, like learning how to breathe, learning how to recognize what's happening in our system. Because if we don't know how to recognize what's happening in our system, we're just going to keep reacting to it. So mindfulness it's where everything starts when we start doing the DBT skills training program.
Okay, I want to just focus in because I think mindfulness is a spectrum, like you're saying about if something that you're doing right now, mindfulness practice is working for you effectively, keep doing it. What we're discussing here may be deviating from your typical idea of people think meditation. I know I did
Mm.
when I thought of mindfulness, this
Yeah.
idea that I'm supposed to sit in silence, focus on my breath, clear my mind of thought. And if I'm not able to absolutely empty my mind, I'm doing it wrong. What do you say to that thought?
Yeah, I've been there. That's the first thing that I say to that thought. When I first started doing this type of work, I had a huge pushback against doing the mindfulness aspect of it. So, because I literally could not sit for extended periods of time, I didn't know how to, be able to sit with the different thoughts that were going on because I just thought as soon as I try to focus my mind and empty my mind of thoughts, because that's what I thought mindfulness was all about. My mind just gets really busy and I can't do it. So screw that. I'm not going to do it. And I would, I just, to be honest with you, I used to lie to people and tell them I was practicing mindfulness when in actuality I wasn't. Because I just had a huge pushback against it because my mind was so busy. Then one day I actually sat down with somebody who was a big yogi. So she was a huge practicer of yoga and we were talking about mindfulness, and she said to me, what do you think mindfulness is? I said, well, it's the ability to be able to empty your mind of thoughts and sit there in this space of nothingness, and with all the Zen thought process. She goes, well, yeah, that is one aspect of mindfulness, but true mindfulness is noticing how full your mind is. That's why it's called mindfulness. And I went, oh. She said, yeah. So when we're practicing mindfulness, what we're trying to do is notice how full our mind is of thoughts and feelings and sensations and all these different things that are going on, and just notice them as thoughts and feelings and sensations. And it completely shifted my perspective on what mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, was all about. Because, in the mindfulness practice that I've developed for myself now and the studies that I've done, I've come across this information that most people, when they first start doing this work, can't focus their mind for more than a couple of seconds. So, in other words, as soon as we try to sit down and focus our mind and empty our mind of thoughts, and we're getting ourselves, attending to our breath or focusing our mind on that thing that's in front of us, so that we're really practicing being in the moment. Within a couple of seconds, there's thoughts and feelings that drop into your mind that try to take you away from that attention. So, from a DBT perspective, yes, again, just bringing it back dialectically speaking, if that's something that you are practicing, silent meditation, guided meditation that helps you to, and you're capable of doing that, please don't think that I'm saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that for the vast majority of people, when they first start out on this journey, particularly as we spoke about before, that those people that are emotionally sensitive, that grew up in emotionally invalidating environments, which is essentially what the DBT approach is designed to work with and for. Focusing your mind for long periods of time into emptiness is something that we're just not capable of doing. It took me a really long time to be able to focus my mind into that kind of space for any period of time more than a few seconds, because my mind was so busy and it was filled with all these different thoughts and feelings and urges to do things that the second I sat down, it was like, okay, 2 seconds later, 2 seconds later. And the act of noticing that is what we mean by mindfulness. So noticing that there is a thought that's come into my mind, noticing that there is a feeling that's in my system, noticing that there is an urge for me to do something, just noticing it and then bringing your attention back to whatever it is that you're trying to do is actually what we mean by practicing mindfulness from a DBT perspective. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And the thing that I like too is when I do it myself, bringing myself back is almost like the way I call my dog. I don't yell at him. I
Yeah.
like, hey, come here, bud. You know what I mean? And that's so important because we want to practice self-compassion. We don't want to get mad
your,
at
your
ourselves.
dog just came to you, right?
Yeah. Got to remember that they are in the room. But the thing I'd like to talk about too is something for myself when it came to, I definitely identify with the person who's got a full mind and a
Yeah.
lot of voices talking, a lot
Yeah.
of thoughts. Something that I've learned from you, and if we could explore for the listeners, is your one mindfulness practice and taking an activity that I'm already doing and trying to mindfully do it. and I did it with walking my dogs.
Yeah.
Um, but could you explain it, and then maybe I'll elaborate more on my own. What is a one mindfulness practice, and how does it
Yeah,
maybe different?
I think before we start talking about the one mindfulness practice, it's important to understand the different states of mind.
Okay.
Because when we're practicing, when we're participating in those one mindfulness activities, what we're trying to identify are the different. Okay, so integrating schema therapy with it a little bit. What we're trying to identify are the different parts of our personality that are active in our thoughts, and each of these parts of our personality exist inside of a particular state of mind. Okay, so from a DBT perspective, there are three states of mind that we're trying to recognize exist within our personality system. Okay, first one, and they're in no particular order, but the first one is what's called reason mind. So when we are connecting with parts of our personality that are existing within a reason mind state, we're basically talking about parts that are very logical, very rational. They don't have empathy for what other people are. There's no emotional connection. It's very almost like black and white in the perspective. This is how it is. These are the facts. Like, there's no. It's very It's very cold almost
Matter
when
of
there's
fact, I think.
yeah, like very parts of our personality are like, well, this is how it is. This is what we have to do, right? And then at the same time, so dialectically speaking, there's another state of mind in our system that exists that's called emotion mind. So when there are parts of our personality that are activated in emotion mind, these are the parts of our personality that are very emotional in the way that they're seeing the world. So, those parts that are filled with fear, filled with sadness, filled with guilt, filled with shame, filled with disgust and anger. And these are the kind of like emotional reactionary parts of our personality that are kicking in to try to cope with the story that's going on in our system. And then again, dialectically speaking, at the same time, there is this area of this state of mind that we're trying to access that's called wise mind. So wise mind is almost like the interface between reason and emotion. It's where those parts of our personality that are the healthy adult parts exist, those parts that are living the life we want to live and being the person that we want to be, the parts that are connected to all those healthy adult approaches that we try to take on a daily basis. And wise mind is the place where we're trying to be because it's the connection between knowing and feeling. So quite often, one of the things that people will say when they come into the meetings where we're talking about addictive, obsessive, and compulsive coping mechanisms and how people use these things to cope with underlying emotional issues, one of the statements that you hear is, "Well, yeah, I know that I'm a good person, or I know that I'm not defective, or I know that people love me, but I don't feel it." And that's because there are these parts of us that exist in reason mind that know things, but there are at the same time there are these parts of us that exist in emotion mind that feel things, and there's no connection between the two. So the wise mind that we're trying to create, the wise mind that we're trying to access at the same time, is to be able to observe everything that's happening in our system, to be able to recognize that there are parts of us that know things and connect them with parts of us that feel things by practicing things in an effective way, as we talked about in the last conversation. The things that we're doing, are they effective for me to live the life I want to live and be the person I want to be in the areas of life that are important to me according to my true authentic values and beliefs? Those are the parts that are existing in wise mind. So um, when we're stepping into doing this one mindfulness practice that you're talking about, participating in things that we're doing one mindfully, we're trying to build our awareness for these different states of mind and the parts of our personality that exist in each of them, so that the overarching sense of self gets to choose which part of our personality is engaged in the situation that we're in. Does that make sense?
It does. If I could ask for some help on understanding and then what to do with it. This is how I'm going to try and phrase this question. So if we're looking at a spectrum here and we've got highly emotional on one side, highly cerebral on the other, in the middle, we're finding the wise mind, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, the term in DBT is walking the middle path.
Walking the middle path. Okay. So I identify as a highly sensitive person,
Good.
and I don't see myself as a highly emotional person.
Mm.
And my deduction on that is it's become a coping mechanism to be cerebral.
Yeah.
So if I'm a person when I'm mindfully exploring, how am I to bring myself recognizing that I'm absent of my emotional experience closer to that middle? What would be the steps someone in my position would take?
Yeah, awesome question. So in DBT, there are, and when we're practicing the skills of mindfulness, there are the skills that are called the what skills and the how skills. So what we do and how we do it. Okay, so what we do when we're practicing one mindfulness from a DBT perspective is we observe and describe and participate. I'm going to break those down a little bit. Observe and describe means to build our ability to be able to recognize and acknowledge that there are different emotional experiences, different thoughts, different urges that are happening in our system, all at the same time. So the term dialectical means that there are lots of things that are happening at the same time. So when we're observing and describing what's happening in our system, we're trying to be able to recognize and acknowledge the different emotional experiences that are connected to the different thoughts, that are connected to the different parts of our personality that all exist within our system at the same time. So um, basically learning how to sit with what's going on in our system and identify whether, yes, there is a part of you that is thinking about things very cerebrally, to put it your way, to very rationally, very logically, like, yeah, we don't need to worry about that. It's not important for us to think about how we're feeling right now. Let's just suck it up, buttercup kind of approach, right? That's a very kind of reason mind parts perspective. And at the same time, when we learn to sit with that experience, we can also notice that there might be a part of us that is that's feeling quite angry about that situation, or there might be a part of us that's feeling a level of disgust, or there might be a part of us that's feeling afraid about what's happening in that situation. So, learning how to identify by just sitting with what's going on in our system, and then slowly but surely learning how to observe and describe each of those situations, each of those internal experiences, connecting them to different parts of our personality so that we can then participate in life from this mindfulness perspective. So, what we do is we observe, we describe so that we can participate. How we do this is we do it non judgmentally, we do it effectively, and we do it one mindfully. So, the key to being able to observe and describe is to be able to observe and describe non-judgmentally. So when I notice that there is a thought that's in my system, when I notice there is a feeling that's in my system, I want to be able to learn how to describe this non-judgmentally. So in other words, I'm noticing that there is a part of me that is that's feeling sad right now. Okay, I'm just noticing that it's there. I'm not judging that experience. So if I find myself going, I'm noticing there is a part of me that is feeling really sad right now. What the hell is wrong with me? Let's suck it up, buttercup. Why am I feeling sad? I've got nothing to be sad about. I am not in a wise mind state of observing and describing. I'm connected to a part of my personality that's being really judgmental, probably one of my internal critics. So the non-judgmental piece when we're observing and describing is incredibly important. Why? Because that's what's effective for us to practice something that is called cognitive diffusion. So the whole purpose of the one mindfulness practice, the whole idea of observing and describing non-judgmentally the different parts of our personality, connecting with their thoughts and their feelings, is so that we can practice something that is called cognitive diffusion. Sometimes this gets labeled as something that's called unblending. Basically, what that means is that if we are able to observe and describe an emotional experience in our system non-judgmentally and identify it as a particular part of our personality, we can actually unblend or disconnect from that part so that we can just observe what it's doing, and in some cases start to communicate with that part, start to let that part of our personality know that it's okay that it feels the way that it does. So when we observe and we describe non-judgmentally, we can participate in life effectively to be able to live the life we want to live and be the person that we want to be. So how we do it is non-judgmentally, we do it effectively, and we do it one mindfully. So that brings me into the one mindful activities that we started this aspect of the conversation about. So one mindful activities, a lot of people think that in DBT, in any kind of mindfulness practice, I used to think, I don't know, people that are watching this or listening to this right now might have the same perception. I used to think that if I'm going to practice mindfulness, I need to be sitting in the middle of a field on a cushion, with Tibetan chimes going in the background, with hum and all these different sounds going on around me, so that I can get into the space of, this sense of Zen that's in my system. Um, yeah, I ain't got time for that. So, trying to build, I'm a busy guy. I've got children, I got a relationship going on. I work a full-time job. I'm coaching football teams, soccer teams, and all this sort of stuff, right? So I got a busy life. So how am I going to practice mindfulness if I've got to sit there and be in this space of Zen? Now, again, just to be clear, if that is something that you are able to do, so you've got the time to do that and you're capable of doing it, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. Keep doing it. If you're not, and you're somebody like me who's got a busy life and you don't have the time or want to create the time to be able to do that, then we can practice things one mindfully. So what that means is we take activities that we're normally doing. So things like walking the dog, like you mentioned, walking your dog. Things like washing the dishes. I live in Canada, as do you. Shoveling the snow.
You do it while you're driving, right?
Yeah, I do. I practice one mindfulness while I'm driving. I want to be cautious on telling people that one though, because driving is it's important that we're very aware of what we're doing. So I participate in my one mindfulness practice when I'm driving for about 5 minutes. Basically, what we do is we take activities that really we don't have to pay attention to what we're doing. So things that we just do automatically. So some people practice one mindfulness when they're eating their lunch, if they've got, if they're alone. Like you said, I practice it when I'm driving. So I drop my kids off at school in the morning. There's a 5 to 10 minute drive home, depending on the traffic from the school back to my house. So I don't know about you, but I drive automatically. It's not something that I'm consciously focused on. I'm not thinking hands on the wheel, foot on the accelerator. I'm not having to think about the art of driving or the action of driving. It's just something that I do automatically because I'm 51 years old. I've been driving since I was 17. So, it's just something that's automatic for me. So that's a great opportunity to practice one mindfulness, which means we focus our attention on the thing that we don't normally focus our attention on. So I don't normally focus my attention on driving. So when I'm practicing one mindfulness when I'm driving, if you're doing it when you're cutting the grass, shoveling the snow, walking the dog,
I like
eating your
brushing your
lunch.
teeth when you gave us
Yeah,
the exercise. Do it with the opposite hand.
yeah, brushing your teeth. Yeah, do it with the opposite hand too, because then you've really got to focus in on that. So what we do is we participate in these activities one mindfully, and we focus our attention on the activity itself, and then we notice every few seconds how our mind tries to distract us. There's a part of our personality that drops into our mind that tries to take us off in a different direction. So, I might be driving the car and I'm really focusing my attention. Like the way I do it is I try to focus my attention like I'm taking my driving test. So I put my hands on the wheel, I'm focusing on the mirrors, I'm looking at my speed. I'm really like trying to focus my attention on the art of driving. And then I notice usually within about 2 or 3 seconds, there's a part of my personality that drops into my system that goes, I wonder what we're having for dinner later. Or there's a part of my personality that drops into my system that goes, oh, I can't believe my kids weren't listening to me yesterday. That's really annoying. Or usually the language is a bit stronger than that, but there's these different thoughts and feelings that drop into our mind that are coming from different parts of our personality, and I just observe and describe them as parts of my personality, and then just bring my attention back to the action that I'm participating in. So whether that's brushing your teeth, driving your car, eating your lunch, walking the dog, shoveling the snow, whatever it is. So that being said, when we're participating in one mindful activities, we don't need to carve out any special time to practice one mindfulness. We can just build it into our regular daily routines, right? So there's a lot of things that we do on a daily basis that give us the opportunity to practice one mindfulness. And the whole purpose of practicing one mindfulness is building the muscle of awareness. Okay. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when I'm driving my car, paying attention to what's happening in my system, and I notice that there's a part of me that's thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner later, why does that really matter? It doesn't in the grand scheme of things. But in terms of building the muscle of awareness, it's incredibly important that we practice the ability to notice these parts of our personality and observe and describe them when we don't need to, so that we're building the muscle of awareness when we actually do need to. So when we do get activated, if we're not practicing the ability to observe and describe our personality from that perspective, practicing the art of cognitive diffusion, which is all in the language, when we need to do it, when we do get activated, when there is a part of our personality that's saying, I want to go and use that substance, or I want to go and yell at that person, or I want to stay in bed all day today because I don't want to go to work, or, whatever that part of our personality is doing that is maladaptive and ineffective. If we haven't built the muscle of awareness prior to that by observing and describing parts of our personality in those one mindful activities, the chances of it being there when we need it are incredibly slim. So one mindfulness is all about building the muscle.
I think of it as in a way stretching. I've sat on the couch for too long at times and had to stand up and just give
Yeah.
myself just so I can get up. Because if somebody called, hey, Aaron, we need you in the kitchen, and I've been sitting on the couch for 5, it's like, oh damn,
Yeah,
same idea, right?
it's like building. So in DBT, right? The focus is on from the way that I practice it anyway. The focus is on skills. Okay, so I'm a certified skills trainer in DBT, and the skills themselves are, most of the skills when we talk about them are, there's a lot of common sense that are involved in them. There's a lot of stuff that people, when you start describing the skills of DBT, will say, oh yeah, I know that, yeah, that's something that I do sometimes, yeah, totally get it. But that's the key. It's, if it's something that you're doing sometimes, then it's more of a coincidence than it being a skill. The skill is an intentional action that we participate in to build the muscle of doing it organically. So practicing these skills and practicing the art of cognitive diffusion through the one mindful activities that we're participating in is like, it's like training your mind in the same way as you would train your body. So a lot of people can relate to this when we start talking about sports or musical instruments, things like that, right? If you want to play golf, if you want to play a guitar, a piano, if you want to play any kind of sport where there is repeating actions that you have to take, then you have to train your body to be able to participate in those actions, right? I wouldn't say I'm very good at it, but I somewhat play musical instruments, kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. And when I first started playing guitar, for example, it was very mechanical. It was very, rigid. It was kind of, I had to think about what it was that I was doing. But the more I practiced it, the more I participated in the skill of playing the guitar, the more organic it became. For those people that play sports, so like golf, when you first pick up a golf club and you start swinging it, it feels really weird. It feels very rigid and mechanical. It feels like it's not natural. But the more that you practice it, the more that you participate in the training of building the muscle memory, the more organic it becomes and the more naturally you start to swing it. It's exactly the same with our mind when we're practicing one mindfulness. We have to participate in the training of doing things one mindfully so that we're creating the natural tendency for us to observe and describe our parts, so that when we get activated, it's habitual for us to observe and describe them and participate in the action of cognitive diffusion. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I think that I got 2 questions to kind of lead us off with it. First one is, everything starts with stop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we're going to talk
the
about that in distress tolerance. Yeah.
so we're not going to get into that today. I wanted to, if we can, and then this gives a little teaser of what
Yeah,
we're
for sure.
talking. The fact that it's this mnemonic word, stop or
Yeah.
stoop, depending on how you want to go about it. And it is really like it's yeah. When I stopped, Stephen, after I put my hand through the wall and I had to go bandage myself up, I did a stop exercise. It's like,
Yeah.
well, let's do it before we put our hand through the wall,
Yeah.
right? How do we get to the point of being able to introduce something like, first of all, what is the stop exercise? And like, how do we get to a point where we can diffuse before we react instead
Yeah.
of in hindsight, if you will?
So the reason that, and yeah, you're right, DBT, we are going to talk about the distress tolerance skills in the next conversation that we have. And the most important skill from a DBT perspective, in my opinion, is the stop skill. And it is a mnemonic. So mnemonics is a term. A lot of people think we're talking about acronyms, but there is a difference between an acronym and a mnemonic. Mnemonics is basically a way that you remember something that you're supposed to do, or it's a specific order of things that you're supposed to do. So in the stop skill, S stands for stop, T stands for take a deep breath or take a step back. O stands for observe. So this is where the observe, describe, participate piece kicks in. And then the P stands for proceed from this new mindful perspective. So the reason why the stop skill is incredibly important is because it's the gateway into the opportunity to use all of the other skills. Now, we're going to get into a lot more detail about what those skills are in some of the other conversations, but basically, and the reason why you said is it stop or stoop, we stop, we take a deep breath, we observe and describe what's happening in our personality non-judgmentally and effectively so that we can proceed and participate in life, living the life we want to live and being the person that we want to be. But that O, where we're observing and describing what's happening, is also the opportunity for us to implement some of the other skills. So that's why the stop skill is probably one of the most, in my opinion, it is the most important skill in the DBT skills arsenal. The thing that activates the stop skill, though, is our ability to recognize that our system is in distress. That is the absolute key to being able to notice that, to being able to implement the activation of the stop skill. So how do I notice that my system is in distress? And what does it mean that my system is in distress? This is why the mindfulness aspect of DBT is I cannot state it enough how important it is. If I'm not able to be aware of what's happening in my system, if I don't have the ability to recognize that my system is going into distress. So in your example, if I don't notice that there is a part of me that's getting angry, if I'm not able to recognize the buildup of emotion, then I react, I punch the wall, I yell at the person, I do something that I'm going to regret later, and then I'm sitting there afterwards going, shit, I did it again. So the mindfulness and the one mindful activities are all designed to build self-awareness. Understanding what it means that your system shifts from its baseline of, whatever normality might be for you. I'm shifting away from that. I'm able to recognize it. I need to stop, right? I need to stop this process from going in its normal direction. I used to think of it like a flow chart. You know what I mean? Like this happens, this gets activated, this is the thought, this is the feeling, this is my behavior. The stop skill goes, this gets activated, let's go in a different direction. Right? And it takes it off in a different direction where we stop. We don't follow the usual process. So the key to activating the stop skill is the ability to be able to recognize the distress. So how do you notice that you're in distress? And in the work that we do, distress is all about fight, flight, freeze, submit, or distract. So how do I notice that I'm either in a fight mode, a flight mode, a freeze mode, a submit mode, or a distract mode? What does that look like for me? Because as soon as I can recognize that I'm in fight, flight, freeze, submit, or distract, then I can activate the stop skill. And I'm now in a space where I'm observing and describing what's happening in my system non-judgmentally so that I can effectively participate in living the life that I want to live and being the person that I want to be. Make sense?
It does. And okay, one last question I'm going to ask you. I'm going to pull it back to the spectrum where we're talking about the wise
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a scenario I found myself in, and I hope listeners can relate to this. So a person is telling me that something I've said or done has upset them, and my response to them is to say, I can't possibly be in control of your emotions. If you're upset right now, it's because of something you're feeling, not something I've said or done. That's a very matter of fact, logical, rational response that has kept people away from me for years. What do you think about that thinking?
Well, I mean, the first question that I'm going to ask somebody that comes into a meeting or a one-on-one work with me, when we're looking at things from this DBT perspective, the first thing that I'm going to do is start talking about the understanding of dialectical thinking. Okay, so it's not that that behavior is good or bad. It's not that that behavior is right or wrong. Every behavior serves a purpose, and I'm sure that for at some point in time, your system learned that reacting to somebody's conversation that way was effective for you to meet your needs in that particular moment. I'm sure it was at some point in time. The question that we want to start asking, though, this is kind of taking us back to the first conversation. The question that I'm going to ask in that moment is that behavior effective for you to be the person that you want to be? Does it help you to make the connections that you want to make? Does it, give you the opportunity to live the life that you want to live? And if it does, if it keeps you in a space that is helpful for you, if it keeps you in a space that, in the big picture, not in the short term, okay, the key to everything that we're doing in the dialectical approach is looking at the bigger picture, because, as I said before, all of our behaviors are effective in the short term, regardless of what they are. Substance use, anger, apathy, matter of fact, like whatever it is that we're using. Yeah, codependency, 100%. That schema of self-sacrifice, like I'm going to, give up my own personal needs to make sure your needs are met. Yeah, in the short term, it's incredibly effective. But in the bigger picture, in the living the life I want to live, being the person I want to be, in the areas of life that are important to me, according to my true, authentic values and beliefs, is the behavioral response that I'm using right now effective? Does it line up with that particular philosophy and that particular approach? And if it does, don't worry about it. Keep doing it. Who am I to tell you how to live your life? That is entirely up to you. Who you want to be is your choice. If it doesn't line up with that philosophy, though, then we get curious. So why do you keep doing it? Not judgmental. We get curious, because that means that there is a part of your personality that is reacting in your system with a behavioral response, probably because it's afraid of what will happen if it doesn't do that. So there's a part of you that's going, I don't like the way it's making me feel. And this is not how you're going to process it in the moment. It's going to happen like that. Right. So there's a part of you that's going, that person just said that. I don't like the way that's making me feel. So there's a story that's been activated in your system. There's an emotion that's on the horizon, or it might actually be bubbling underneath the surface, might actually even be present in your system. And now there's that part of you is afraid of what's going to happen. So that part of you just goes, well, I'm not responsible for your emotions. And it starts getting very kind of passive aggressive in the way that it's communicating what's going on. And if we're not aware of that part, we'll just blend with it and become it. Right?
We're back to mindfulness kicks.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're not aware of that part in our personality, we'll just blend with it and we'll just behave that way. So the mindfulness aspect of us gives us the ability to recognize the distress. So first of all, this person has said something, there's a distress that's in my system. Okay, I'm now in one of those modes: fight, flight, freeze, submit, or distract. I'm now in one of those modes, right? One of those coping mechanisms. And there's a part of me that is reacting according to the beliefs that's associated with the particular story that's active in my system right now. If I observe and describe that part non-judgmentally, so I'm not observing and describing it as bad or wrong, I'm just observing it and describing its current state of mind. So I'm really noticing that there's a part of me that just wants to be, really passive aggressive with this person right now. I hear you, I see you there, so I'm just gonna, validate its point of view. And at the same time, it's really not effective. We appreciate this relationship. It's not effective for us to be that way with this person. So let's have a decent conversation about why the person feels that way. Let's get curious with them so that we can make a connection with them. It's basically, the way that the healthy adult would approach a situation like that.
I like it because, sorry, go on, Stephen. Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, rather than the emotional child reaction that would have come out in me in the past, which is that kind of, well, I don't care about you. Doesn't matter.
It's funny too, because as you're speaking, there's parts of me that are going, we're not being passive aggressive, we're being assertive. No, we're being passive aggressive. That's what's going on inside my head while you're speaking right now. And so there is a healthy adult and a fucking angry child in there.
Yeah.
That are definitely voicing their opinions right now. But I do agree with you that no, and for me, it is, I love connection. I love empathy and compassion and sympathy. And I find myself very jaded or rigid at times. And it is something I'm working on. Maybe not as effectively as I could with the language that you were just describing, which is helpful. But I do think that it's a coping mechanism. It's not a genuine assertion. It
Yeah.
is like almost like what while you were describing it, the reaction of guilt. It's
Yeah.
like I don't want to feel guilty, so you know what? You should have fixed it. Don't come to me. It's not my
Yes.
fault. You and it's the same kind of thing where somebody's like, you know what, you just said really upset me, and I'm like, well, it's not really what I said that's upset you. It's the meaning that you're tying to it. You see, and it's like,
Well, because if they're
whoa,
telling you that you've done something that's impacted them that way, there probably is a part of you that feels guilty.
right.
Because if living the life you want to live and being the person you want to be means that you respect other people and you treat them with the respect that you want to be treated with, and you want other people to observe your boundaries when it comes to those values and beliefs, and then somebody tells you that something you've done has created that emotional situation, yeah, you know what? I am not responsible for fixing your emotion, absolutely not. But I am accountable for the role I played in the activation of that emotional experience. That's me living the life I want to live and being the person that I want to be. So when somebody says to me that, you said this and it activated this emotion in me, there's a part of me that feels a little bit guilty about that because I'm not being the person I want to be in that relationship. It's never my intention to activate that emotional experience in somebody else. So while I'm not responsible for fixing your emotion, I am accountable for the role that I played in the activation of it. So, in that moment when somebody says that to me, if I don't know how to deal with that guilt that comes up in my system, there's a part of me that goes, "Oh, I don't like the way that makes me feel." Then there might be an angry response to control what you're saying to me. So, that angry part of me is going, I want to control what it is that you're doing because I don't like the way that's making me feel. And if I control what it is that you're doing, I won't feel this way. Rather than just recognizing that there's a part of me that feels guilty, being accountable for that and getting curious with the other person so we can create an emotional connection around the situation that just played out. But there were parts of me that were just afraid of that. So it's just easier for me to get angry and control what you're doing than it is for me to sit with the emotional experience that I'm having, be accountable for it, and create an emotional connection with the person that I'm in a relationship with.
And instead of anger, it could even be just in this case, matter of fact,
Yeah,
just
avoidance.
detached,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And well, you know what? I'll give you an example. I'll leave the listeners with something. I recently just read something to a group of people, and one of the people in the group responded to me on the side because I said at the end, whatever you think I'm talking about says more about you than it does about what I've written. And it's because it was supposed to be an imaginative story. I've created a
Yeah,
lot
an
of ambiguity.
exploration. Yeah.
Yeah, an exploration, right? Well, somebody wrote to me on the side saying, I really didn't like what you said at the end there because what are you trying to say? Because I thought of something morbid. I'm a morbid individual, and I went, wow, no, not at all. I'm so sorry. That's what you took from what I was saying there. But then once I finished that conversation, I called a friend and went, you won't believe what this person thought I said. I needed that validation. Like that part of me was like, okay, we'll suck it up for a second. We'll have it
uh,
here. But
yeah,
he was up here going, we need someone to agree with us. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah,
it's progress, but it's still,
yeah. But I mean
still
that's the journey of living the life we want to live, right? We're striving for perfection with the understanding that it's an extremely difficult, if not impossible, thing to actually achieve, right? But it's the striving for perfection that creates the growth, right? The more that I try to live the life I want to live and be the person I want to be in the areas of life that are important to me, the more I grow, the more I become that person that I want to be on a regular basis. And at the same time, I acknowledge that I'm not the person I want to be all the time. It's just not possible for me to do.
we
And I've
are
been practicing,
humans.
yeah, because I'm a human being. And I'm a highly sensitive human being, right? My emotions kick in for me sometimes, and now my emotions are kicking in for me all the time. But sometimes they catch me off guard, right? Sometimes I'm not in the headspace to be in that healthy adult wise mind state of mind. Sometimes I'm wrapped up in a part of me that's existing in emotion mind, and that part of me just reacts to the situation in a way that I don't catch in time. And that's because I'm human. That's going to happen, right?
And
So
like most, it can happen behind the wheel of a car. I think
yes,
there's something about the behind the wheel of a car that just
safety.
it's our safety. And
Because
this
you're
is
in a bubble, right? You're in this safety bubble where people can't hear what you're saying, people can't see what you're doing. So you can express your emotional experience, especially if you're on your own in that car, right? There's a big philosophy around Personality traits will really come to the forefront when you're alone in your car and things don't go the way you want them to. How you handle adversity will come to the forefront, right? So, yeah, man, like there's parts of me that come out when I'm alone in my car and something happens. There's a part of me that's like gets really angry, and the part of me that starts swearing at people, and all these like these profanities start coming out of my mouth because I'm in this space of safety where nobody can see that, right? But that's a part of being a human being. That's a part of the journey, right? If my expectation is that because I know these things, I'm going to be able to do it perfectly. That is not a part of the human experience. The human experience is about being vulnerable. It's about knowing that we are not robots. We're not perfect. We are emotional beings. We're going to have emotional experiences. And sometimes I'm going to be in the headspace to be able to catch those emotional experiences and be the person that I want to be. And sometimes I'm not.
Could I not throw out, just so we could use this with a little schema here? Isn't having a perfectionistic overcompensator a part of the human experience as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. Yeah. If you've got a part of your personality that's existing in that perfectionistic overcompensator mode and it's tied to a schema of unrelenting standards, yeah, absolutely. Totally get it. But it's about working with that part to set a realistic expectation rather than the unrelenting standard that is being expected when it's in full flow.
And
Right.
this is the
So,
why, not the what. I
yeah,
can
yeah.
appreciate
Why
why,
is the
but not
part
what.
doing that, not what the part is doing, right? So, in the mindful approach, what we're trying to do is recognize why parts do what they do, and validate why the part is doing what it's doing, not validate what the part is doing if it doesn't line up with who you want to be.
I think that's a great way for us to end off, Stephen.